السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. Respected brothers and sisters, we are currently living through the last 10 days of this blessed month of Ramadan. Ramadan is a way of cleansing ourselves, and so we go through an entire year in which we have shortcomings, we have sins, we are negligent of some of the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the month of Ramadan comes in order to purify us from the sins, from the negligence, the state of ghafla, to make us aware of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, aware of akhirah, to remove the effect of bad habits and sins. But as we are human beings, even during the month of Ramadan, we are going to continue to sin. And so some have said that Ramadan is an expiation for the entire year, and the last 10 nights of Ramadan are an expiation for Ramadan itself. And this is why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man qama laylat al-qadr imanan wa ihtisaban, ghufira lahu ma taqaddama min dhanbih." That the person who spends the night of Qadr in worship, believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hoping for reward, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will expiate or will remove and cleanse all previous sins committed by that individual. And because of the great importance of this night of Qadr, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began the revelation of the Quran in Laylatul Qadr. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, "Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil Qadr." Indeed, we have revealed it in the night of Qadr. Some say that the meaning of Qadr here is the night of power, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala informs the angels of His decree for the entire year to come. So the people that are going to die throughout the year, and the people that the children that are going to be born, and then the provision of every individual and every creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that information is given to the angels in Laylatul Qadr for the entire year. Others have said that Laylatul Qadr means the night of greatness, that it holds such a great reward, or the worship of this night holds such a great reward, that it was named Laylatul Qadr. And the surah says, Laylatul Qadri khayrun min alf shahr, that the worship of the night of Qadr is better than the worship of 1,000 months. Better, which is approximately 83 years and some odd months. And so ulama say, because this ummah has a short lifespan, we only live 60 to 70, very few of us exceed that. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us an opportunity every year to multiply the rewards, so that we are able to compete with previous nations who lived perhaps 300, 400, 500, 600 years on the face of this earth, and had a greater timeline to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so this is why the last 10 nights of Ramadan are extremely important, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see from the believer. And if we have spent Ramadan seeking to progress, then at this time, this is the peak of the rahmah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the forgiveness and deliverance from hellfire is happening during these blessed nights of the last 10 nights of Ramadan. Also, another important piece of information is that Laylatul Qadr travels in the last 10 nights, so it changes from year to year. There is no specific time. The people generally have this assumption that it is the 27th night, where Rasulullah ﷺ did not even hint that it was the 27th night. And had he known that it was the 27th night, then perhaps he would not have gone into i'tikaf in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. So the practice of i'tikaf, which is a sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he did on an annual basis, and actually in a year that he made i'tikaf, the final year of his life, he made i'tikaf for an entire 20 days. The purpose of it was to ensure that he spent the night of power in its entirety in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha says that when the last 10 nights of Ramadan would come, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would spend all of his entire nights in the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he would sort of exercise a great deal of strain on himself, if you like, in order to make the most out of these 10 blessed nights. And so we are human and we are weak, and perhaps we have not spent Ramadan as if we had planned or we had wished. Things come up, our responsibilities, sickness and illness and so on and so forth. So what is required is that in this short time that is left, these last few nights that we have, we inshallah azza wa jal increase our efforts. Some of the things that can be done is, number one, trying to stay in a state of dhikr throughout, especially a state of istighfar, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, whenever we are aware, seeking forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Continue with our recitation of the Quran, continue with our attendance of Taraweeh from beginning to end. Likewise, Qiyam is taking place in the Masjid at 2:45 every night. So attending the Qiyam if we can. If we are not able to, then perhaps at the time of Suhoor, even offering two rak'ah, with the intention that it is Salatul Tawbah and Salatul Hajah, two things. One is repenting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I offer two rak'ah, and then perhaps in my sujood or after the sujood I can make dua and ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for forgiveness, and asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have mercy and to deliver us from hellfire, asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help us overcome our weaknesses and our desires and our bad habits. So all of these are important, but also asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for our needs, our worldly needs. And we all can enjoy more blessings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in terms of health, or the health of our family members, or our provision and our work and so on and so forth, our family relations. And so making dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these nights is extremely important. And we should not allow for shaitan to make us to make us spiritually lazy, where we're like, we've done enough during the month of Ramadan and this is the end, and let's just wait for Eid to come and be done with it. But rather trying to make, it doesn't have to be an extensive amount of worship, but just a short dua at the time of suhoor, perhaps 2 rak'ah at the time of suhoor with a short dua, but with faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and hope in Allah azza wa jal, in order for our supplications to be accepted, and so that we come out of Ramadan with a higher level of, as we said in the previous 2 weeks, a higher level of awareness of Allah and taqwa, a higher level of commitment to the practice of the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and also a higher level of patience and good character. That is what we are seeking. And so we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that the things that we have been able to achieve and attain during this blessed month, they stay with us throughout the entire year. And it is not the case that Ramadan comes to an end and our worship comes to an end and our good behavior comes to an end. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for that. Likewise, what is important to note is sadaqatul fitr, or sometimes also known as zakatul fitr. The sadaqah that is given at the end of the month of Ramadan, this is an obligation, and it has to be fulfilled before the prayer of Eid. It is approximately £5 per head as a minimum. If a person wishes to give more, £10 per head, £20 per head, on behalf of the members of the family, they can do so. And generally it is an obligation on the person who is the breadwinner, or the person who is earning on behalf of all of the members of the family that are under his care, his or her care. So that includes very young children. Sometimes people think that young children, because they don't fast, and Zakatul Fitr is supposed to be an expiation for anything that has happened in the fast, any sins, any shortcomings that have taken place. So it is on every member of the family that is under your care, and you provide for, inshallah Azza wa Jal, and it should be given before Salatul Eid. And every year there's this discussion that Rasulullah commanded that Sadaqatul Fitr should be given in food. And that is correct, because the idea is for the people who are less fortunate to have something to celebrate Eid with in terms of food, because this is a day where the fast is broken. But there is no harm in giving it in money to charities, because they then acquire food and give it out to people. They do not give money out. Okay, so if it is given in money to a charity, then there is no harm. If you know somebody that is in need and you want to give your Zakatul Fitr to them, then it is perhaps preferable to buy items of food, whatever it may be, and give that, inshallah Azza wa Jal. Generally it is the staple food of a country or a culture or community that is given in Sadaqatul Fitr. Likewise, Eid Salah is going to take place in the Masjid. Most of you will know by now. The times of Eid are announced and published, inshallah Azza wa Jal. Anything else, Sheikh? I think that will be all. Jazakumullah khairan. So we'll proceed with adhan and a short khutbah, followed by salah, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan.